So China clearly has a lot on its plate. You would imagine Xi Jinping would focus on fixing his economy. But like most leaders with inflated egos and misplaced priorities, he's busy with Pakistan, specifically at the LOC, or the line of control. This is the de facto border between India and Pakistan. And this is where China is busy. Doing what? Helping its all-weather ally Pakistan. China is helping build defense infrastructure along the LOC. It is installing communication towers, setting up unmanned aerial vehicles, laying down underground cables and building underground bunkers, doing all the groundwork basically. And that's not all. China is also giving Pakistan SH-15 truck-mounted howitzer guns. They're known as shoot and scoot weapons. These will be deployed along parts of the border. Now, I know what some of you must be wondering. What is China doing here? After all, this is the border between Pakistan and India. So why is Beijing ramping up defenses here? Well, if you know China, you already know that they have an excuse. They say this is for the safety of Chinese enclaves. These enclaves are located in POK, that is Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And why were they built here in the first place? To secure CPEC projects. CPEC stands for the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It's a bilateral project between Pakistan and China, ostensibly to improve Pakistan's infrastructure and boost China's trade. But it's also a debt trap. And more importantly, it's a violation of India's territorial integrity. New Delhi has long opposed CPEC because these are Chinese projects on Indian territory occupied by Pakistan. But China, as always, has paid no heed to India's concerns. Today, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh was in Jammu. He once again called Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, or POK, a part of India. Listen to this.
Pakistan does not have a locus standi there, as it has illegally occupied the area. The Indian Parliament has unanimously passed at least 3 resolutions which state that POK is a part of India.
So that remains India's stance. But Beijing and Islamabad have gone ahead with their project. As problematic as it is, earlier they were only building infrastructure, now it's even worse. Now they are further militarizing the Indo-Pak border. And look at the timing of all of this. China, as we told you, is dealing with a slowing economy, and Pakistan is struggling to remain afloat. They're desperate. They need money from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. They had a deal, but it expires this week. And they're trying everything they can to rescue it, even revising their budget. Pakistan recently passed a budget. It had no real reform. We told you about it. This budget did not suit the conditions set by the International Monetary Fund. Now, they have an ongoing loan program worth $6.5 billion. It was agreed in 2019. It will expire on the 30th of June, this week. The IMF says Pakistan should scrap its populist subsidies if it wants the remainder of the money. Last week, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was in Paris. He met with the IMF managing director, and some reports say he met with her thrice. And now Islamabad is back with a new budget. It has 2 key points. 1, generate an additional 215 billion Pakistani rupees in taxes, and 2, cut spending by 85 billion Pakistani rupees. So clearly, Pakistan is working hard to convince the IMF. Their economy is on the verge of collapse. Inflation has skyrocketed. In the month of May, it had crossed a record 37%. The rupee, the Pakistani rupee, has plummeted, and the country can no longer afford imports. Islamabad knows it needs the IMF deal now more than ever. But that has not stopped it from its nefarious plans at the border. You see, for both Pakistan and China, distraction seems to be the answer to their domestic problems. And what better distraction than militarizing India's borders? So the Wagner mutiny may have lost steam, at least for now. Guess what else is losing steam? The Chinese economy. Their growth forecast has been revised. Earlier it was 5.5%. It's now been cut down to 5.2%. This is China's growth projection for 2023 by credit rating agency S&P. In fact, let me read out what S&P said about this. China's recovery should continue, but at an uneven pace, with investment and industry lagging. This is the assessment of a global credit rating agency, and not the first of its kind. S&P is not the first one to cut China's growth forecast. Banks like Goldman Sachs have already done it. They've lowered their estimates. So the question is, what's going on in China? Why is the economy sputtering? To answer that, we must go back to the year 2022. The pandemic was in its last stages. China's zero COVID policy was crippling growth. Suddenly, they made a U-turn. The zero COVID policy was abandoned almost overnight. Beijing was betting on strong economic growth, a rebound. The economy was supposed to return with a bang. Instead, it was just a whimper. And many reasons contributed to this, like the trade war in America and the exodus of foreign investors. They're all leaving China. But many believe the real culprit here is the shaky foundation of the Chinese economy. It has two main drivers, property and exports. Before the pandemic, property was a crucial source of growth. Not anymore. Between January and May this year, real estate investment has fallen by more than 7%. People don't want to buy a house anymore. There is an unprecedented cash crunch in the property sector. And it's showing. Two more Chinese builders say they cannot meet debt obligations. They cannot pay their loans. And this trend has been on for a while. China's property bubble is bursting, and that has rarely gone well for any country, for any economy. So what does Beijing do? They've decided to focus on rate cuts and stimulus. Banks across the world are hiking interest rates, but not in China. Here, the central bank is cutting rates. They want to generate growth via borrowing. Now, this could be a slippery slope. Cutting rates could jumpstart the economy, yes. But don't forget, global interest rates are rising, so this could put pressure on the yuan, the Chinese currency. As for stimulus, the government is in favor of it. Beijing is preparing to issue billions of dollars of special bonds. This will help bail out local governments, because local governments in China are under immense debt. According to one estimate, a debt of $9 trillion. Imagine that, $9 trillion of debt. A default of this debt would be disastrous. But Xi Jinping does not have many choices. Stimulus and rate cuts are temporary measures. They may help China steady the ship for now, but can they really revive growth? History has some examples. In 1989, Japan faced a similar situation. The economy had slowed dramatically, households were burdened with debt, the GDP growth was lagging. So what did Tokyo do? It ordered stimulus measures. These measures were directed towards investment, not consumption, investment. And this is where Japan went wrong. It led to years of stagnation. And by the looks of it, China could be staring at the same. Meanwhile, in New Delhi, Barack Obama remains the big headliner. His criticism of India in an interview has led to a strong reaction. Last week, he spoke about the state of religious minorities in India and how the tension may break up the country. This, as expected, has not gone down well with New Delhi. The ruling party, the BJP, is going all guns blazing against the former US president. They say Obama bombed 6 Muslim countries, while Prime Minister Modi has been awarded by 6 Muslim countries. The latest one, by the way, is Egypt. The Indian Prime Minister was in Egypt over the weekend after wrapping up his state visit to America. It was the first visit by an Indian leader in a quarter of a century. He met President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. He signed a pact on strategic partnership and was conferred with Egypt's highest civilian award. Here's a report. This is India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Al-Hakim Mosque in Cairo, an 11th century mosque with great historic significance. It was restored by the Dawoodi Bohra community. This community has had a base in India since the 1500s. So when Prime Minister Modi visited the mosque and interacted with the community, it sent a strong message. A response to those who question India's treatment of religious minorities and proof of India's centuries-old cultural ties with Egypt. Here's another picture that burnished India's image. Its Prime Minister conferred with the Order of Nile Award. This is Egypt's highest state honor. And as its recipient, Prime Minister Modi joined an elite list that includes the likes of Nelson Mandela, former US President Jimmy Carter, and Queen Elizabeth II. This couldn't have come at a more appropriate time. This was an Islamic country honoring Prime Minister Modi days after a former US president questioned his government's record on Muslims. In fact, this was the 6th Islamic country to award Prime Minister Modi, a statistic that his party is vigorously reiterating. But the visit to Cairo was about much more than this. It was the first bilateral by an Indian Prime Minister in 26 years. A short 2-day visit, but it ticked all the right boxes. From exchanging light-hearted moments with the Indian community to serious talks with the top leadership of Egypt.
He reflects the wise leadership, and for a big country like India, there is a great development in India, and also this reflects that he is always and continuously working there in India.
Once the grand welcome was done, it was time for business. Prime Minister Modi met Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Al-Sisi was also India's guest at the Republic Day parade earlier this year. The two sides have elevated ties to a strategic partnership. They signed multiple pacts, including on agriculture, archaeology, and antiquities and competition law. But before we understand what New Delhi and Cairo are planning for the future, we must know what they already have. India and Egypt go back a long way. They are among the world's oldest civilizations. One of the first references to relations with Egypt is from Ashoka's edicts. Fast forward to 1947. India had just become an independent country. Less than 3 days after that, India established bilateral ties with Cairo. Then there was a non-aligned movement, or NAM. The world was divided into two camps during the Cold War. India's Jawaharlal Nehru and Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser founded NAM. Post-2014, the relationship took another turn. India began proactively engaging with the Arab world. In the case of Egypt, the focus has been on economic ties too. Reports say more than 50 companies have invested more than $3 billion in Egypt. India is one of the top 5 importers of Egyptian products. Bilateral trade stands at over $7 billion. They want to take it beyond $12 billion in the next 5 years. But the thrust going forward will be on the defense partnership. India is looking to boost its defense exports, and Egypt is emerging as a willing buyer. From Tejas to BrahMos missiles, there's talk of sale and technology transfer. This will help India in more ways than one. Egypt is a strong military power in the Arab world, a member of the Arab League and the OIC, or Organization of Islamic Countries. A deeper strategic relationship with Cairo serves many purposes for New Delhi. And images like these send a message to its critics. Herding, obedience, protection, racing, hunting. The list goes on. What am I talking about? Canine competitions. For many pooch lovers, they're quite a big deal. And our last story tonight is about one such recently held competition, a hunt for the world's ugliest dog. Yes, it is a thing. And a dog named Scooter has raced its way to the top. With its reversed hind legs and loose tongue, Scooter has not only won people's hearts, but also $1,500 in prize money. The question is, does a dog ugliness contest even serve a purpose?
Sparse, mohawk-like hair with gravity-defying strands that stand high as if shocked. A rat-like tail, reversed legs, and a tongue that just won't stay in his mouth. This is Scooter, a real diamond in the rough, pardon the pun. And now he has been crowned champion of the world's ugliest dog contest. It's a world-renowned competition held annually in California in the US for the past 50 years. Now this contest may seem odd, but that's the point. It celebrates imperfection and dogs who had been counted out for their appearance. So pooches come from far and wide to compete for the coveted title, where they not only receive love and admiration, but also $1,500 as prize money. And sure, winning is exciting, even if it is in an ugly battle. But this contest is so much more. It promotes dog adoptions and showcases extraordinary canines who've defied adversity. Most of the dogs in this contest are rescues. Take Scooter, for example. He's 7 years old and had a very tough life before he was adopted. When he was a pup, his breeder wanted him euthanized because he had a birth defect. His hind legs faced backwards. This meant he would never be able to walk. But that wasn't to be. Scooter was rescued. He found a good home, and with the help of therapy and a specialized cart, he's now able to move. According to judges, it was Scooter's determination that gave him an edge. But the fact is, most of these canine participants share a similar troubled history.
So Prince came in from the desert and was involved in a fight for food, and he was the runt, so he got attacked here. So he's only got one eye, so he's missing this eye here. and one of his ears never really sticks up, and he's got this really long tongue. So those are kind of his distinctive ugly features. And he loves belly rubs, as you can tell.
This is Harold Bartholomew. He's a at least 17-year-old Chihuahua, a little rescue. He was actually dumped in a park, and he was supposed to be like on hospice. They didn't think he was going to last long, and I adopted him, and I've had him for close to 2 years now.
Now, dogs may be a man's best friend, but this friendship seems like a one-way street. Across the world, pets are being abandoned. Germany has the most number of homeless dogs, followed by UK and the US. India has a staggering 60 million homeless dogs. A number of these canines are euthanized, and even if they aren't abandoned, dogs are subjected to cruelty. They are starved, burnt, and even raped. But despite this, canines remain a popular choice for pets. And to give you an idea, the global pet market is valued at $260 billion, worth more than the solar and wind energy sectors combined. But more than humans, this costs the pets. Most people go to breeders to buy a dog, whose supply comes from puppy mills, which are plagued by high mortality rates for the young, and mothers are kept perpetually pregnant. Then they are discarded. Pedigreed animals are plagued by health problems because they have genetics similar to offsprings of siblings. And this is where the world's ugliest dog contest comes in. It shows people how they can save a life and do their bit to walk away from backyard breeding. Because the dogs may look ugly on the outside, but it is through no fault of their own, and they can still be man's best friend.
It's huge, just being able to put it out there that, you know, you don't have to get an adorable little puppy. These guys have so much love to give.
So think about it. As they say, adopt, don't shop, and save a friend's life.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Israeli lawmakers have begun debating a proposed judicial overhaul, sparking mass protests in the country. In Myanmar, authorities have seized illegal drugs worth $180 million to mark World Drug Day. And monsoon has arrived in India. The states of Haryana and Himachal Pradesh have witnessed flash floods and landslides, though. And finally, what makes June the 26th significant? We are going back to history, to the year 1945, when the UN Charter was signed by representatives of the 50 countries that were participating in San Francisco. It is the founding document of the United Nations. We leave you with these images. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Labour President Truman arrives to attend the last sales, and the world is now final signing of the charter. The signing is a historic. Fellow delegates,
if we had had this charter a few years ago,
You may have seen headlines of yet another mass shooting in America, gun terror. We are in Richmond, some 40 miles from Washington, D.C., and we're here at a shooting range. We'll speak to people here to try to understand why the average American takes up guns. Look at this. This is an ad for a gun.
There are about 400 million firearms in the United States. There are about 600,000 negative outcomes.
This is the only country, I think, which has such frequent incidents of school shootings.
And when you take 600,000 and you divide it by 400 million, that's a very, 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 very small percentage negative outcomes.
This is America for you. It's a country which has more guns than people.